boy, do I have an exciting video for you this week. It seems that scholarly interest in the femme fatale has died down in the past 2 years, but I want to bring it back into the public's attention. After reading some things recently, I feel like there's still a discussion to be had, a whole other half of the discussion, because it seems that on YouTube and in general public discourse, the only conversation that we have about femme fatales, at least in an intellectual way, I guess, is in relation to whether or not the femme fatale is a positive or negative portrayal of women, and whether or not that trope or archetype perpetuates negative or positive behavior towards women. But almost no one wants to dive into the psychoanalytic aspect of the femme fatale's origin. Most video essayists, through film analysis, just scratch the surface, I think, of what she stands for. The most commonly cited essay about female representation in film is Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema by Laura Mulvey. This is the essay that we can thank for allowing the phrase male gaze and the term objectification to enter into the layman's vernacular through the common social interest of just watching movies. Though that essay is written from a psychoanalytic point of view, most people don't really share with their audience the meat of that theory. We may know why man has anxiety over feminine nature in regards to how it manifests in culture, but we don't really talk about how it exists on the level of the psyche. My problem is that people don't really know what the male gaze is, and know even less about what objectification is, because they aren't familiar with the psychoanalytic structures that they hail from. I think that this results in conversations about the femme fatale trope being very one-dimensional, and especially on YouTube, repetitive, very repetitive. And on TikTok, it's just practically dead. Going deeper, you realize that the true cause of the femme fatale's creation in cinema, or otherwise, was so much more than just men's fear of women entering into the workplace or fear of her sexuality and her empowerment. At this point, those effects are just too surface level. So, let me reveal to you the other half of the discourse. You have probably heard that the femme fatale is a male fantasy projected onto women. The male gaze, which is the perceptual field through which objectification is possible, is a method of reducing anxiety around a woman's ambiguous nature. This can be done by making her into an impossible ideal, into a faceless, disembodied sex thing, or a villain to be dominated and reconciled. What people do not talk about is that those behaviors exist because woman's purest state is not objectifiable. So everything that the male does to objectify her only exemplifies his incompetence. Such ideas are expressed by the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, who currently has a substantial influence on my thinking, just so you all know. Woman herself is completely unknowable, impenetrable, and undefinable, non-objectal. She represents a void, which is all too often interpreted as a vessel, which is then filled by the reflection of the male's own anxiety towards what he cannot understand, control, or withstand. But we never get around to talking about what the female void is outside of male objectification, because everyone is just too busy talking shit on the male gaze. Also, by the way, this idea that the male gaze structure can just be copied and pasted onto women, thus giving birth to the female gaze, is exactly the kind of logical fallacy that Freud suffered from when he tried to copy and paste the Oedipal complex onto women, which is known to be a farce. There doesn't have to be a female gaze, guys. We don't have it, we don't need it. But that's a tangent for a different video. Another female characteristic that is generally ignored by theorists and philosophers over the centuries is dismissing the innate creativity of women, which is traditionally reserved for men. As an artist, I never really empathized with that point of view. As you all know, I just recently moved into my studio apartment, and this place also doubles as my work studio. Now that I live alone, I am very determined to continue my work in art and also be very disciplined about it. And as a perfectionist, that can be difficult. However, not so surprisingly, the sponsor of this video, Skillshare, introduced me to someone who can help with that. Tim Tamashiro. I've spoken about Tamashiro before in another video and recommended his Ikigai class as well. And I also found out that this guy used to be a monk. It's just so like me to steer you guys towards a monk, isn't it? But anyway, he has a class called 85% Perfect, Productivity for Creatives, which I'm sure you can deduce from the title, attempts to release the artist from the strain of ultimate perfection. But first, if you don't know about Skillshare, it is the largest online learning community with thousands of classes led by industry experts, creative professionals, prolific hobbyists, and everyone in between. It's a society of inspired people hoping to encourage you to do something creative. And according to statistics, creative activities reduce cortisol levels in your body. They reduce stress, which means that being creative is part of your health journey, as if there weren't enough reasons to love art. Skillshare offers a wide range of categories like personal development, to home and lifestyle, to art and illustration. There are countless ways for you to be creative and less stressed out. I'm also shouting out Tamashiro again because I truly appreciate his approach to creativity and individualism. Nothing that he says feels canned or regurgitated from somewhere else. His advice feels very honest, direct, and for me, very effective, very penetrative. Like when he talks about productivity, he talks about it for creatives as the need to be prolific, to make a lot of stuff. And whenever you do create, things only have to be 85% perfect, right? So basically the other 15% becomes this drive to continue working and continue making things. That simplification brought me so much clarity, just the way he said it. And it made me less stressed out about just churning out a large body of work. So if you're interested in that class, or any of his classes, or anything on Skillshare in general, first 500 people to use my link in the description or the QR code provided will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Act fast, baby. Okay, so woman is not objectifiable. What does that even mean? We need to clear up what an object is and what purpose it serves. The object, by definition, is the means by which we can fulfill a drive. It's also a stand-in for the ineffable. The object can take the shape of a sign, a symbol, a fetish, a phobia. However, objects have never been connected directly to the drive. They're only a consequence of a need for an object, which makes them inherently insufficient. For example, you're not really scared of a spider. They just represent your fear. It is your way, it's what you have to do to give your fear a look and a name, because your fear, in essence, is unmanageable otherwise, because you can't understand it fully. The spider as the object of your fear gives you something recognizable to work with. The femme fatale works the same way. Women are often compared to voids, vessels, empty space, night, darkness, and we don't like that. We don't like emptiness, we don't like darkness, so we have to fill it with something. So we fill it with an object. So man creates the femme fatale out of a woman's void. The femme fatale exists ostensibly as a threat which can be managed, but instead her true meaning is to reflect a man's own demons and his impotence in the face of them. He gives his fear a face and a name, but the femme fatale persona will always be a misfire. If the object was never an ideal stand-in for the ineffable drive, then the femme fatale as a character, as a persona, is that incongruence to the extreme. The only time that man may dominate the unknown is within the unrealistic confines of cinema. In Victor Mazin's essay, The Femme Fatale, Lou Andreas-Salomé, he writes, "Female subjectivity, as the object of male desire, is cyclically created through a series of roundabout maneuvers, approaches, and loss. Woman remains unknown to man." According to Lacan, the more sexist the man is, the more he objectifies through the male gaze, and uses his own projections to perform this kind of heroic act on screen of destroying the femme fatale, the more he exhibits his relenting toward her. She is the Freudian thing, what existed before and continues to resist our interpretation. The pacification of the femme fatale in film noir is simply wishful thinking, or a band-aid fix to a problem, I guess. The infamous philosopher Slavoj Žižek, who is also largely influenced by Lacan, says this about those masks or personas that attract the male gaze. The inevitable conclusion seems to be that the feminine secret, inaccessible to the male phallic economy, consists of the feminine substance that eludes the reign of phallogocentrism. Now, we have to be careful here. We have to tread carefully. The idea of the feminine being ineffable nothingness sounds cool and elusive, okay? Powerful. Very powerful. But it's also where the very dangerous idea of women's passivity was engendered in men. There are some theorists who believe that because of this nothingness or emptiness, woman does not even exist outside of the male gaze. That is because she is empty. She is meant to be filled, given meaning. So it's because of this problem that we now face that we have to dive into Žižek's counter-argument. He says, the complementary conclusion to the feminine substance that eludes the reign of the phallogocentrism is that insofar as there is nothing behind the masks, woman is wholly subordinated to the phallus. If we don't have any substance, we lack direction, we are some primordial soup, that can bring woman right back into the tyranny of the male gaze, as they feel the need to give us a part to play. So again, I have to bring up the question, what is woman? What are we outside of what men project onto us? How does an indefinable creature exert herself in a world of definition? And eventually, what is the potential of the femme fatale? Feminist theorists have been trying to start that conversation for decades now. But perhaps one of the earliest to provide a somewhat practical answer would be Andreas-Salomé, who, not so ironically, was a disciple of Freud and a psychoanalyst in her own right. Salomé found her leads in defining femininity within the condition of narcissism. For Salomé, a woman was a narcissist by her very nature, and this is where her perfection and her full immense value lay. She established a new view of woman as an independent and self-sufficient being. For her, female sexuality was always more perfect, more integral, less liable to aggressive tendencies. Her drives were directed not to an alien external object, but to her own environment, to her own external boundaries, and ultimately, to herself. A woman, for her, does not pursue the unattainable, the infinite. Why should she? Herself being the goal. Femininity, according to Salomé, is that condition which man had lost. The teleology of a man is what turned him inside out, doomed to the search for a lost object always outside of himself. A woman, on the other hand, preserved herself in her objectless narcissism. So for men, the object is always known to be outside of oneself. It is externalized, but women have never needed to externalize in the first place. The male is far more comfortable doing that, externalizing his inner world. But woman is contented with herself, so much so that she's able to dissolve literally in the world around her. For Salomé, narcissism presupposed not collecting oneself, but rather dissolving oneself into the surroundings, self-dissemination close to depersonalization, denial of the boundaries of one's image. Woman is limitless. Then, she sees herself reflected in everything else without fear or anxiety. She's not afraid of depersonalization because she is in everything she sees, because she's integrated into those things. In Hélène Cixous' The Laugh of the Medusa, she explains feminine unity and wholeness and the infinity through the act of writing, a traditionally male-dominated sphere. Her libido is cosmic, just as her unconscious is worldwide. Her writing can only keep going without ever inscribing or discerning contours. Impregnated through and through with these brief, identificatory embraces, she goes and passes into infinity. She alone dares and wishes to know from within, where she, the outcast, has never ceased to hear the resonance of forelanguage. She lets the other language speak, the language of 1,000 tongues, which knows neither closure nor death. To life she refuses nothing. Her language does not contain, it carries. It does not hold back, it makes possible. I am spacious, singing flesh, more or less human, but alive because of transformation. So a woman's self reverberates outward endlessly and is present. She is present in all things, ever expanding, transforming, assuming different positions, and speaking in different languages. This fluidity rejects a permanent object of recognition. And it is here that we can place the femme fatale within the female void. The femme fatale for man is concrete, but it is fluid for women. Femme fatale makes a man aware of his lack, whereas the woman who indulges in this persona feels completeness. If only she recognizes that persona as mutable, one of her infinite number of identities. Cixous continues, I desire the other for the other, whole and entire, male or female, because living means wanting everything that is, everything that lives, and wanting it alive. Castration, let others toy with it. What's a desire originating from lack? A pretty meager desire. The femme fatale may be a product of the male gaze, of objectification, of a role placed on women. But woman, for a moment, sees herself within this role. She entertains it and then moves along. She's not staked to the ground, bound by just that persona, for she exists in all the other ones as well. Her ability to empathize and to love is her capacity to expand outwards without bounds. And that is something to be afraid of.